Hey ecofictologists, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lovis and today I am jumping into part 2 of the question of how important is scientific accuracy in fiction. Last week we talked about its importance in fiction where science communication is the goal, or fiction where science or a certain scientific field plays a major role in the story. Something like CSI or Bones or something like that. And today I am back with more questions. And I am going into that other category of stories where science communication probably, most likely, very definitely not, was, not the goal of the piece of entertainment. But hello, unintended consequences. So if you haven't watched part 1 of this series, I do recommend that you go and watch that first, because I give much more of an introduction as to why I'm talking about this right now in that one than I am going to give in this one, because I just kind of want to dive into the topic today. But yeah, definitely go watch that one first and then come straight back here and finish this one. So, the second scenario, the second category of fiction where science communication or teaching something that is scientifically true was not the driving motivation behind a piece of fiction. You might say that that relaxes the need for accuracy, right? But in my opinion, there is still this question of unintended consequences. If you put something in your fiction that could be true, or that your reader could take to be true, is it your responsibility to make sure that it is true? Or is it to be really super clear that it's not, and that your reader should not actually learn anything? And how much scientific accuracy can be sacrificed for the sake of entertainment value? I touched on that last week a little bit as well. Even so, that question kind of holds true for both types of fiction. Because we are there to be entertained. If we were looking for a lecture or to learn 100% accuracy, I suppose we would find a nature documentary or a textbook or a work of non-fiction. So by the act of looking at fiction, we are implicitly allowing a little bit of, dramatization, artistic license. But how much? You've all seen those YouTube videos, right? By like GQ or Wired, where they bring in an expert to look at scenes from different films that revolve around the topic that they are an expert in, and to have them watch it and respond to how accurate they are. You just sit there and giggle as they tear apart the inaccuracies in these scenes. And I always find you actually learn so much more by watching those videos of them correcting inaccuracies. I find them very entertaining. Anyway, I was watching one where environmental scientists were responding to films about environmental disasters and saying whether it's a realistic potential threat. I'll definitely link that in the description below if you want to watch it. Now, some films are obviously dramatized and exaggerated in order to be terrifying, but others, you can't really tell the difference between, okay, well, that's never gonna happen, and, well, that could happen. And so you don't know whether it's a realistic fear to have that this natural disaster could occur. And unfortunately, we live in a time where natural disasters and environmental disasters are a common occurrence. And there are so many films that focus on kind of these catastrophes and show the aftermath and show how humanity responds. And sometimes it makes me wonder whether we're being bombarded by all these different versions of a catastrophic future and we don't know which ones are realistic threats or not. So actually, are we being completely desensitized to actual realistic danger and the size of the catastrophe that is climate change? Like, is this why some people are not scared enough of what the changes in our climate actually mean for our way of life and for the way of life of many people around the world? Because it's been painted with the same brush as the unrealistic catastrophe dramatizations that we've seen, and so they don't take any of it seriously anymore. It's just, you know, these are the things I think about. It's sad. It's kind of depressing. There was another series of those videos that I enjoyed very much where they brought on a wildlife biologist. His name was Forrest Galante, and they showed him a bunch of movies that had animals in them. Jaws, Anaconda, The Grey, Jumanji, etc. And he watches them and he tells you whether they are anatomically and behaviorally realistic. And most of the time when you watch these films, you're not thinking, okay, they're really trying to teach me something about snakes when you watch Anaconda. But a point that he made was that a lot of these films, and a lot of films that feature kind of predatory animals, they paint them in a really bad light. They demonize these animals. And mostly because of unrealistic depictions like wolf packs tracking humans through the mountains and picking them off one by one, or scenes like that. And that would be one thing if it didn't bleed into our reality and our kind of awareness of of nature around us, but it does. You remember last week I talked about, well, you know, maybe it's more important for the science to be accurate in pieces of fiction that are relevant to our lives today versus ones that are not so relevant. And I think this is one of those times. I mean, when rewilding or reintroduction efforts hit roadblocks because people think that releasing wolves into the Highlands would mean that they would come into playgrounds and eat children, we have failed the public in science communication. When people think a bird of prey is going to target a school and make off with their toddler, we have failed society in science communication. And reintroduction and conservation efforts are suffering because of this. Peter Benchley, the creator of Jaws, said that he regretted making the films because they added so much fuel to the fire of people's hatred and fear of sharks, and it made conserving them so much more difficult. And he actually became a big marine conservation advocate to try and undo some of that damage. He probably never intended Jaws to be taken seriously. He did not make it to say, look, here, I'm going to teach you something about sharks. But even if no one thinks there is a giant-ass great white shark ripping apart ships out there, they are afraid of sharks. They see sharks as terrifying hunters that target humans on purpose. And that's enough. That's enough. So even if they haven't taken specific details or facts or anything, they don't think it's true, it still influences how they see that species in reality. If you remember back to an interview that I did with John D. Burns, the author of SkyDance, Fighting for the Wild in the Scottish Highlands, which was a wonderful, extremely funny book about the reintroduction of lynx into Scotland. He and I talked about this concept of anti-ecofiction. Fiction that is depicting nature as something to be afraid of, something to keep as much distance from as possible. And in that interview, I found this such an interesting observation because technically it does fall into my definition of ecofiction, which is a piece of fiction where nature and or our relationship with our physical environment plays a major role in the plot. That holds true for all of these films and books that I'm talking about right now. And I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't thought of the negative or alternative way of looking at that definition, because this kind of anti-ecofiction messaging can be very harmful to efforts to try and rebuild or protect nature, which is really the opposite of what I think ecofiction should do. And that's kind of how I see these films that demonize animals and try and make you fear them. I think they're harmful. But don't get me wrong, this does not mean that I think all nature is cute and cuddly and loves you, so please don't go out into the forest or into the ocean or into any equally wild place and start petting things or something equally stupid. You know, just because, oh, but Lovis on her channel said that nature loves me. No, a healthy respect of nature is needed. I think everybody needs a healthy respect for and of nature, but I don't think this is the way to inspire that healthy respect. I think maybe awe and wonder would get us further. And some stories that feature kind of us against nature, they probably thought they were telling the truth of the time, and they were finding explanations for things that seemed inexplicable, and I acknowledged that. But some of those cultural beliefs of us against nature, and nature must be tamed, and we are the top of the food chain, they endure, and they are still influencing the way that we interact with nature now, because we aren't unlearning and relearning based off of scientific evidence. We're emotional creatures first. But thinking about this as an author or a writer or a movie script screenwriter, thinking about how you paint something as evil or good and benign or dangerous is also a form of communicating truth. Last week I was pretty much working off of the premise that the audience is going to absorb something. Even if it's not your intention, they're going to absorb something, and therefore it is your responsibility to think about what that something might be, even if your goal is not science communication. It's also about avoiding brushing things aside, saying, oh, it doesn't matter, that's not my responsibility, that it doesn't concern me, that's not my intention. You can still choose not to perpetuate those old kind of demonizations of creatures. You can choose to show a different relationship with nature. You can find drama elsewhere. That is my challenge to you. Find drama elsewhere, not in the evilness of top predators that actually keep all of our ecosystems functioning. Wouldn't it be nice if we could put them back where they belong? That would be great. So that's my little trip down the rabbit hole this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I can't wait to hear what you think about it. So leave all of your thoughts and comments in the comment section down below. Let's get a little discussion going, because these are just my opinions. Again, I mean, I haven't actually given any answers to any of the many, many questions that I have asked today. And that was not my goal. My goal was to ask the questions and get people thinking about them. I have my opinions, which are probably very obvious from how I've talked about this, and I think about them in a certain way, but everyone is going to have their way of thinking about this and their certain field of fact or fiction that bothers them the most and where they expect the most accuracy. For me, it's about nature and our relationship with it, but it could also be, you know, somebody it's economics, or somebody it's forensics, or somebody else it's architecture, or whatever. They're all up for debate, and so let's have a debate. Let's talk about it. So anyway, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I post every Wednesday all about reading and writing ecofiction and how it can be used as a science communication tool. If you like what I do and would like to support me, then head on over to patreon.com/ecofictology and become a patron, where your monthly donation will buy me books and also supports Lovely Oceans, a marine conservation organization operating out of Mozambique. If you're looking for a bit of community around your ecofiction, then please join us in our Rewilding Our Stories Discord server. We have people looking at ecofiction from 1,000 different angles. Well, there are like 200 members, so 200 angles, which is still a lot, and we're having some great discussions over there. So the invite link for that is in the description below. And that is all from me, so happy reading. Hopefully you find something scientifically accurate to tickle those nerdy tendencies that I know all of you have. And I will see you next week, ecofictologists.